Thank you, everybody. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon to colleagues in India. Pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to talk. My name's Andrew Stokes. I'm a business development manager in the international department at the Energy Systems Catapult, and I was responsible for leading the IfCA project from the Energy Systems Catapult. Maybe I'll pass to Professor Verma.
Thank you, Andrew. Hello, Professor Paul. I'm Professor Ashish Verma, Professor of Transportation Systems Engineering at Indian Institute of Science and also convener of IISc Sustainable Transportation Lab. As the name suggests, the lab focuses strongly on sustainability aspects in every dimensions of solving transportation system problems. That's in brief from myself. Thank you.
Namaste, Mr. Professor Paul Monks. My name is Manjula. I'm a civil servant belonging to the Indian Administrative Service. Presently, I'm the Commissioner of the Urban Land Transport here in Karnataka. Karnataka is in the southern India, is one of the states in southern India. Thank you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this call today to talk about good development. I'm Professor Paul Monks. I'm the Chief Scientific Advisor at the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy here in the UK. But also, quite interestingly, in the context of today's call, I'm actually an air quality scientist who's worked in air quality for over 20 plus years. So it's a particularly interesting project to hear about today and discuss with you and find out a little bit about what it looks like a wonderful undertaking that has provided some kind of real outcomes in this area of reducing the impact of air quality on citizens. So in some senses, let's start the conversation there and move to thinking a little bit about what the problem you were trying to address in this and why that problem was so urgent. Professor Verma, I'll hand over to you to start, I guess.
Air quality, and if you see in many of our Indian cities, we are seeing quite substantial degradation in the air quality. And many of our cities are quite high on PM10 and other pollutants. And transport-related emissions, tailpipe emissions, are a major contributor. So this is definitely an important and critical aspect. It's also leading to adverse health impacts. This actually got us very excited. I'm sure Andrew can add his perspective on why this project is important. But then, as we moved on and carried out this wonderful Church Street testbed pilot project, we actually expanded the scope in understanding not just the air quality, but also the overall quality of life. How do you improve the overall quality of life when you do pedestrianization of busy streets? Maybe Andrew, you can add more.
Absolutely. The problems of air quality and also the other problem, key problem that the project addressed was kind of trying to support the electric vehicle transition. These two issues are really, kind of universal, aren't they? Loads of cities throughout the world are struggling with these two. Everybody knows that we've got these big climate challenges and the decarbonisation challenges, and electric vehicles are part of that also interact with the air quality piece. So yeah, this project was really trying to have a look at those two issues, understand some of the challenges and opportunities in Bengaluru related to them. And then the crucial aspect, one crucial aspect as well, was trying to help private sector and innovation develop some solutions that can address some of these problems. So a lot of the focus of the project was on stimulating the business ecosystem in that way. Just to explain, from the UK side, that was the Energy Systems Catapult leading with our partners, Connected Places Catapult and Satellite Applications Catapult. But we worked with kind of 10 plus UK innovators in the EV and air quality space. And then on the India side, 10 plus there as well as our key Indian partners as well. A lot of the project was on, a focus of the project was on developing these demonstration projects and these kind of test beds. And the key showcase of that really was this clean air test bed, which gave us an opportunity to measure some impacts related to pedestrianisation, because we kind of closed off this busy street called Church Street in the city every weekend for a number of weeks. We closed it off, pedestrianised it, but we allowed micro-mobility and e-mobility solutions. And we also allowed kind of air quality, air sensors and things to be demonstrated and trialed on the street. So that gave us an opportunity to kind of trial things in a real life context and also showcase technologies out there and raise kind of awareness of some of these issues as well. And that the involvement of DULT is absolutely crucial in that, in the clean air testbed, obviously, as well as Professor Verma's team at the Indian Institute of Science. Maybe Mrs. Manjula would like to say a little bit about the Clean Air Street.
The Directorate of Urban Land Transport has transport planners and urban planners and urban designers. Typically in Indian context, many cities and many states do not have similar organization. So it is a first of its kind organization in the entire country. Generally, we have engineers trying to do the transport planning. So here, as an exception, we have a department with transport planners, engineers, and urban transport engineers and urban designers. For us, this was an exciting project because of following reasons. Number one, Bengaluru has a very thriving innovation ecosystem. It's actually the fastest growing innovation ecosystem in the country. And we have a very robust startup policy. But generally what happens is startups do their innovation, but they don't have the opportunity to showcase their products in real environment and get feedback. So that was something which was missing in the ecosystem. So doing a test bed gave us an opportunity to give this, give this opportunity to the startups to kind of display their products there on the Clean Air Street, get public feedback. That was one. The second aspect is it has also given us some kind of a learning on how do we plan and implement a test bed. So we did not do any test bed implementation earlier. So this was first of its kind implementation of test bed. Third was Church Street is a very busy street in central Bengaluru. It's predominantly commercial street. It has been done up few years back with cobblestone paving and all that. There were proposals to pedestrianize that street, but businesses were against it because they thought, like in any other city, they think if you pedestrianize a street, it kind of is going to impact the incomes and revenues. So here we also saw there is an opportunity to demonstrate to the businesses the fact that pedestrianization is only going to get more people, new people onto the street and into the businesses. So that was also one of the motivation for going ahead and participating in this collaborative exercise.
No, that's really wonderful. I mean, it really kind of paints the picture there. I think the important things is the solution-based focus that you've taken, which I think is an important kind of step forward now, particularly in the area of air quality. We don't need to diagnose the problem anymore. We need to do the solution space. And I think what very strong feature of that is the partnership and the solutions that have been placed there, as well as Andrew says, the EV piece is thinking about the longer term and the decarbonisation sort of agenda. So, Professor Verma, how did this research really help you address the problems that you'd set out here? How did it allow you to really trial those new solutions that Mrs. Manjula's just really talked about?
It puts us in a very good situation, being a research institution and an independent research lab. How do we bring a more scientific thinking and database in understanding the consequences and the impact of such solutions that government and other business ventures want to implement? So what we essentially did is we followed a very structured methodological approach to assess, as I said, the quality of life impacts by taking both quantitative and qualitative approaches and parameters, as well as all dimensions of sustainability, typically when we say environment, social and economic. The whole idea was that we don't see this kind of intervention of pedestrianizing a street just as a transport policy intervention, which is basically to promote public transport and discourage the personal mobility, ownership and use, but see it in a larger context of a more broader development goal of quality of life. So this really actually came out as a very unique framework, and we did this whole assessment on several of these factors, either through using sensors or through using direct questionnaires and surveys with not just the visitors, but also the businesses on the street. Often the businesses are the ones who complain when you do pedestrianization, that our businesses will suffer and things like that. So we wanted to take their understanding also. And what came out was almost a 470-page impact assessment on several of these dimensions, giving a very comprehensive understanding to all stakeholders. What would happen if you introduce such kind of street? So whether you want to understand in terms of transit-oriented development around metro stations, fortunately there is a metro station right on the street, and we could assess how the ridership or boarding and lighting of metro station could actually improve because of this pedestrianization, and the results were very promising. Likewise, we tried understanding how the footfalls on the street increased, how the businesses benefited from it, how the revenues increased and so on. And at the same time, we did a comprehensive assessment, understanding how visitors perceived it on this larger dimension of quality of life. Did they really feel and that it in some way or the other improves their quality of life? So the overall assessment that we have done, I think gives a very good benchmark study for anybody to take up this initiative or scale it up, not just in other Indian cities, but I would say worldwide, because such kind of methodological assessment has hardly been seen. If I actually look at the whole research literature also, I have not come across such studies.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think I would get a very strong impression from both yourself and Mrs. Manjula that actually the important part of this was actually taking, we talked about air quality at the center of this, but actually it's that more holistic approach to understanding the impact on the citizens around all the different elements of changing a street and its infrastructure. That's quite important. So, from your perspective, Mrs. Manjula, what were the key things that made a difference for you?
See, from the beginning, we were very sure we should follow this framework of engagement, collaboration, measurement, and analysis. Because without engaging with the businesses, without engaging with the residents, with the political representatives, there was no way we could have continued it for 6 months. So we took the opportunity of using both traditional face-to-face meetings with the local political representative, the businesses, and the residents, and also use social media at a later date to get a larger audience to get involved in the process. So this engagement was quite intense, and it also included students, as we had engaged some 8 students on a Queen 8th Street internship, so that these students could work with a premier institution like Indian Institute of Science and participate in the analysis. So the engagement was very, very strong. Then we built a lot of collaborations there. Apart from the collaborations with Catapult and IISc, which were there from the beginning, we had one with the Science Gallery of Bengaluru. We had with the artists, because after all, the space has to become engaging. Today when a public space has to be designed in such a manner, it has to be designed to kind of be lively, be engaging. It should attract people to come there. Only then we can make our point very, very clear that we need more pedestrianized streets. So having the presence of artists kind of encouraged, because a lot of young people came there to showcase their talents, and suddenly people started coming there by word of mouth through social media. They got attracted and came there. So the collaborations were also kind of very strong. And then we had a very structured framework, as Professor Verma mentioned, not only looking at the quality of life parameters, but also helping startups to get data on people's perception about their products. And this also helped us. And many times, as governments, we lag behind when new innovations come into the public landscape. Like mobility is innovating constantly, and suddenly as regulators, we are taken aback because we are not abreast with the developments that are happening. So in this case, it also gave us, as a regulator, an opportunity to actually closely see how people are interacting with these electric vehicles and what is that they have in mind. So some of the kind of feedback that came up is people have range anxiety, and people have pricing they're sensitive to pricing. So there are these kind of elements that also came up as feedback from the structured assessment that we did. That finally, to say what was the big takeaway, the big takeaway is that there is a lot of unmet need. for public
Right.
spaces. People want safe, inclusive spaces where they can have social interactions. This was a huge unmet need, which everybody understood and realized. Earlier also we were talking about pedestrianization, but the point was made more clear because they saw that happening, and also thanks to the very substantial and significant research that was taken by the IASC. Thank you.
I think there's three messages I get very strongly from that conversation. The one about the people-centric approach, and I think that's a very strong feature of what you're talking about. That one about making sure it's wrapped in a strong methodological framework. I think that Professor Verma made, and the third point, Mrs. Manjula, that you made there, really about meeting an unmet need. I think people not recognizing that there was that need, but when you actually showed them what could be done through a project like this, you grow that, and you create a need through developing an unmet need, which does require that sort of holistic approach of bringing everything together. Andrew, what perspective would you take on this question of around how the way the research helped address this kind of wider problems?
I think the holistic point is absolutely crucial. I mean, it's obviously something that from the energy systems catapult we try and take forward in all of our projects anyway. But I think looking at all different aspects of the problem in the way that my colleagues have talked about is absolutely crucial. But to add to that, I think there are lots of innovators, there are lots of firms out there with really interesting solutions. And I think one of the problems they often face is, how can they scale up? How can they test things in a real life context? How can they de-risk that process to showcase what they've got, to get real life feedback on their products and services and how they work, how they can really showcase it to the wider community and businesses and potential clients and stuff like this. So I think, just to add to what my colleagues have said, I think that aspect of really supporting these innovative businesses with their products, because these guys can develop the kind of solutions to these problems that we'll need. Lots of them are already out there, they just need help scaling up. And the international element of having UK firms and organizations working with counterparts in India as well, there's opportunities for cross-learning, knowledge sharing, all of these things to help us scale up and develop some of these private sector solutions to these problems. So we had, as well as kind of e-mobility and micromobility solutions on the Clean Air Street, we also had a number of different kinds of charge points installed across the city as part of the project. We worked with a UK innovator who they use satellite imagery and grid data to generate kind of optimal placements of charge points around the city. We worked with a company called Enzen to do some air quality monitoring around kind of brick kilns and map that to satellite imagery and things like that as well. So it was just to add to what my colleagues have said, I think that this is absolutely a crucial part of the program for me, was helping these Indian companies and UK companies establish these connections and opportunities to scale up, show what they can do, test what they can do, get real life feedback. I think that's a crucial part of building this kind of suite of solutions for problems in the longer term.
So that kind of takes us to the beginning to think about the question of impact, and that I think both Professor Verma and Mrs. Manjula have already sort of hinted a little bit at this, but it's probably worth pulling it out a little bit more explicitly in the conversation. So, Mrs. Manjula, I'll start with you. From your perspective, what do you think the longer term impact of having done this work will be?
I think one of the major impacts is both the media, the general public, really understood what we mean by pedestrianization. The businesses also have learned that it doesn't really lead to kind of erosion of their revenues. In fact, during this Clean Air Street initiative, a lot of businesses participated and gave discounts. So overall, at the at the city level and the state level, it created such a buzz that I think we have kind of paved way for many such initiatives. We are working on a couple of them right now. So it kind of helped. Second thing is that as an implementing agency, as a government department, it helps us to understand that we cannot have one size fits all kind of a solution. The typology of a street is different. depending on the typology of a street, we may have to kind of work out and structure any initiative. In this case, in Church Street, it was predominantly commercial. And when we actually went in onto the street, we realized there were 40 apartments, which were all tucked in nooks and corners. We were not aware of them. And these people had concerns like, how do I move? They were all senior citizens. So we had to kind of give a solution which was good for them, which they liked, by giving them permits to move out and things like that. So it depends in Indian context. Every street would be different from the other. We need to look at, study, plan in detail, and then we can implement such initiatives. So that is from the pedestrianization perspective. And from the startup perspective, definitely I think both the startups and we have learned a lot. And right now, we have come out after this exercise of Clean Air Street Initiative. We came out with a research and innovation policy because we realized as an organization now we are confident of helping the startups in this mobility space. So that was a great takeaway for us as an organization.
Professor Verma, your perspective on the longer term impacts.
In fact, to add to the learnings that agency like DLT has got, they are also now coming up with TOD policy, and recently they've drafted an active mobility bill for getting it legislated, and I can clearly see a strong learning that we have taken from the Church Street testbed that is feeding into several of these policy documents and legislations and bills that DLT and other agencies are taking up. So I think that would eventually will have a lot of long-term impact going forward. As Madam pointed out, this whole sustainability agenda, when we keep speaking and presenting, it doesn't really go into heads of people. If you actually see, we are in a aspiration phase where the large middle class of India has aspired to own and use a car. In such an aspiring society and a developing economy, it's not easy to push the sustainability agenda. But with this testbed and pilot, we could actually showcase how this sustainability agenda could be not just bring core impacts and improvements in transportation system, but also feed to the larger goals and development goals for individual citizens as well as for people at large, community at large.
That's a really big takeaway, and I think you're obviously being very modest, because I understand the project has won awards, and I believe it's a benchmark for the future, both in India and globally. And cities around the world have been in contact with the Catapult and the British Embassy to discuss future replication. And I think I get a sense from listening to you this morning and hearing about the project why that is really the case. You've really set the benchmark for that. So, Andrew, what role for the international partnerships as part of this? Professor Verma just made a strong case that it is really talking to those bigger sustainable development goals.
I fully agree. I think there's a really strong case for replication here, and as you said, we have been contacted about a number of different cities in India and internationally as well. And I think the international collaboration piece is absolutely crucial to this, and I'll come to this in a minute, but I think it's made even more crucial by the COVID pandemic, to be honest. So these problems that we've been talking about air quality, the electric vehicle transition, and the quality of life for citizen pedestrianisation, it's just such universal problems around lots of different cities across the globe. And there are certain kind of universal elements and solutions that can be applied, but there are also, of course, locally specific aspects that you have to be acutely aware of, such as some of the details Mrs. Manjula was talking about on the street. So I think the international collaboration was absolutely crucial to get this balance right of sharing international knowledge, understanding some kind of potentially universal things, but being acutely aware of the specifics of the local context. It's enabled us to make connections and try things that we weren't originally planning to do. Just in terms of the innovators we've supported, we've seen examples of UK innovators since the involvement in the project, signing commercial contracts and MOUs with Indian counterparts, so they could potentially, work more in the Indian context. We've seen examples going the other way as well, of course, of Indian firms signing these agreements with UK counterparts. So I think all of that comes from the international collaboration piece, which I think is absolutely core. And in terms of the COVID aspects, just to highlight, when we started this, nobody knew the word COVID, and we were having, regular trips to Bengaluru, and we'd actually planned to take a group of innovators to Bengaluru to meet Indian counterparts, and that was an ill-fated trip planned for kind of the month. We booked our tickets, but it was the month after the COVID pandemic kind of broke. But the key role of our international partners meant that we could still make the project work. We rapidly turned it around to a virtual project. Mrs. Manjula's team, Professor Verma's team, other partners as well, played an absolutely crucial role in enabling us to still make the project work, kind of virtually, if you see what I mean. And for us at the Energy Systems Counterpart, I think this has also provided a bit of benchmark for how we can do these things in future as well. We don't necessarily need to get on planes as much as we previously might have thought if we've got strong local partners. So international collaboration, absolutely crucial to all of that, I'd say.
So we're coming to the end of our conversation now, over the last half hour or so. So I guess I'm going to turn to each of you for some final thoughts and comments on this, and kind of a take-home message that I guess you'd like to give to anybody who's listening to the discussion, that the very great discussion we've had this morning or afternoon, depending which time zone you're in, around this Innovating for Clean Air sort of project. So I'll turn to you, Professor Verma, first for your sort of take-homes.
Thank you. I think interdisciplinary approach, multi-stakeholder approach, and a collaborative approach is the key today to address any of these societal issues, including related to transport, mobility, quality of life, and so on. And this is one such important project where we have demonstrated and made value out of all these aspects. I've also been engaged in several such projects with UK, universities, as well as many other European, countries and institutions on this multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder approach. I have found so much of value, and I even value more after this wonderful experience that I have with Catapult. We are collaborating on several other test beds also, and I'm looking forward to more such, enriching experience and a larger benefit to both sides, in terms of this collaboration.
Thank you, Professor Verma. I'll turn to you, Mrs. Manjula, for your kind of final thoughts on this.
Yes, I want to take from what Andrew mentioned. International collaboration was very crucial, mainly because there are so many innovations out there, so many best practices. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we could learn from them and we could adapt them to our local specific, situation. So that way it kind of helped us, this collaboration kind of opened our eyes to what are the best practices that we could adopt in our own situation. The second point is about the collaboration that Professor Verma mentioned. See, it's not enough if governments come forward and do something on their own. It is important to kind of have some proper processes in place. So interactions and collaborations with academia play an important role, because after this very thorough research of Professor Ashish Verma, we had empirical evidence. I mean, we were not saying something, generally people think governments would like to say something and without any much of evidence, and people are skeptical, sometimes they are skeptical and they don't believe. But we have this empirical research that today we have with it. So that kind of also helps. I think definitely I agree. All stakeholders need to come together so that they can leverage each other's strength there and collaborate more in a more engaging manner to resolve the issues, not just of mobility, but even the issues arising out of climate change and so on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andrew, briefly from you.
I echo all of what my colleagues have said. I think a holistic approach, a collaborative approach, taking into account many stakeholders is crucial. Raising awareness amongst the wider community is absolutely crucial. And then the final word on just the business ecosystem. There are lots of great minds and great innovations out there. And if we can give them a bit of support to showcase their things, develop their things, it will help us get the solutions we need.
Well, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation today. It's been really enlightening to kind of hear about the project and what it's delivered. You know, air quality is a universal problem, and I'm left very strongly with the feeling that local solutions that are thought about in the round, but local solutions that are also well measured, is a really good way forward. And the very, as Professor Verma said, multidisciplinary approach to this project's taken. It's no wonder that it's won the awards and the plaudits that it's won. So thank you very much, Professor Verma, Mrs. Manjula and Andrew Stokes, for joining me this morning in conversation around the Innovating for Clean Air project, and good luck with whatever it brings you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Many thanks.
Thank you, Professor.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.